So I have just asked you what are the differences between this vocabulary word, sociological imagination, and another vocabulary word, sociological perspectives, both of which we've talked about day 1, day 2. We're on day 3 now, right? Okay. So you correctly said that the first part of it, you said almost all of it, that it's the ability to make connections or to see that bigger picture in life. Right. About society, and then Coco, you helped with the rest of it. It's the micro level life experiences that you see the connection to the bigger picture in life. And then perspectives, sociological perspectives, on the other hand, are what? A point of view, ways of interpreting. It's a way that you're going to look at life experiences and you're going to look at macro level social structure, and we might interpret it different ways. Did we talk about like trying on sunglasses with different colored lenses on them and seeing things a little differently? Well, okay, well let's use that metaphor now. If you tried on sunglasses and they have like a different tint on the lenses, you can look at the same thing. You can be looking outside at the green grass and the trees, and the color of it changes. You're looking at the same tree, you're looking at the same grass, but the way it looks to you is different based on those different colored glasses. That's what the perspectives are. Those perspectives are really connected to the sociological imagination, the ability to make connections between big picture or social structure, macro level issues, social level issues, and my micro level, your micro level life experiences. What's going on in the world that makes today the experience that it is going to be for me today, right? Or makes when I graduate from college and I get a better paying job and I'm happy about that better paying job, but wait a minute, over time, maybe what I thought I was going to be able to experience with a better paying job, maybe it's not all I thought it would be because I've got the debt from that college experience that got me the better job, but the more money that I've got has to go to pay back the debt, and so is your personal experience affected by the macro scale norm that says you got to go to college to make a better paying job or to have a respectable position in society or something? So your personal life experience is like, ugh, why can't I thought things were going to be better by now. I thought this college degree was going to give me a better paying job. Well, it did. Well, why didn't it feel like it? Well, the debt from college. I don't know. Well, I don't want to say that you're more poor, but you have the debt goes away after a while. 3 years ago, I paid off mine. 3 years ago, I paid off mine and got rid of that car that went like that when I backed up out of the parking spot. Y'all ever have a car like that? Yeah. Anyway, that was my car until 3 years ago. My college loans were paid off, grad school loans were paid off, and I got myself a car. So anyway, a nicer car. Okay. So, so that connection, the ability to see the connection between macro scale social forces or social issues. I'm using words that I've seen in sociological textbooks before. We had a textbook a long time ago when I first started working here, and the definition in that textbook said the ability to see that social forces control the micro level experiences or something. It's like, wow, that sounds like the force is not with you, right? So yes, I mean, it's not that mysterious. It is an academic thing that you can look at macro scale social structure and how does it make your trip to Cold Stone Creamery later, okay? So the perspectives are the way you interpret what happens, okay? Functionalism that I asked you, have we talked about that yet? Functionalism is the first one, right? Is functionalism macro or micro? Macro. So we're talking about big picture stuff. And somebody give me a description, like how is it that a functionalist looks at the macro scale point of view?
Like a machine.
Like society is a machine. Is a machine made out of just one part, or does it have multiple parts? And what about those multiple parts? They're just separated, not connected, not touching each other?
No, they're connected.
No. They're connected how? In a predictable way? Mm-hmm. Your car has all the hoses and the pipes and the fluids and the pistons and all the stuff, injectors. Those have to be hooked up together correctly for your car to run, for your car to, listen to my keyword, function correctly, predictably, stability-wise, stable, okay? After a while, does your car need some assistance?
Yes.
And do you have to recharge and fill it up with fluids and give it gas or diesel or whatever it is? Yeah, you have to do that after a while, and you have to get some maintenance after a while. Sometimes the water pump goes out and you got to replace that, those kinds of things. And you have to prop it up so that it runs the same way, in the predictable way that you expect it to over time. Does society stay the same over time?
No.
Society's like your car, according to a functionalist. Things are going to go wrong with it every now and then, and you got to replace the water pump. And it'll be the same as it was before, but is it really the same as it was before? When you drive the car off the lot the day you buy it, and 60 months later you make your last payment, is that the same car you drove off the lot?
No.
It's the same car,
Just one down.
but it's not the same car.
Probably the same car with 100,000 miles.
Yeah, or 200,000 miles an hour,
Or
exactly.
whatever.
The mileage, right? So you don't feel about the car the same way you did before. It doesn't look the same way it did before. There's stains all over the carpet, there's etc., right? I mean, it's the same car, but it has changed. And as it has changed, you have, You have propped it up with fixes over time. And that's what a functionalist says about society. All the different parts of society are there because they need to be there for the whole machine to function properly, to move forward and progress properly, and it's always working toward equilibrium, or what's the better word, less complicated word, it's always working toward stability so that things will predictably run smoothly. So we've talked about poverty a lot as examples so far this semester. Is poverty something that on a micro scale is a nice thing to experience? No. On a macro scale, according to a functionalist, is poverty part of our social structure? Like hundreds of thousands and millions of people are experiencing poverty? So on a macro scale, a trend across the board is that a lot of people experience poverty. Poverty is an economic condition that exists outside of you and me. So it's part of the machine is what I'm getting at. If society is a machine made up of different parts, and you just told me poverty is a part of our social machine, then a functionalist would say, okay, on a micro scale, maybe poverty sounds like it stinks, but on a macro scale, it's part of our machine, and we haven't gotten rid of it, we haven't replaced it with anything, so how does it work for stability in society? It's a good question, huh? What do you think? We're not talking about micro level experiences, we're talking about macro level experiences. Is poverty part of our machine that we call society? Yep. Then it's got to have some kind of functional purpose. It's got to have some kind of benefit, can I say, to other parts of society. It's got to help society run like your car runs. Does poverty perhaps, well, anybody have an idea about how it could?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Because people in poverty are like so desperate to work that they'll work for the minimum wage, which is convenient for people.
Okay, so I don't know if everybody could hear that, but here is, you said it kind of in a micro scale way, but you really pinpointed a macro scale issue that's necessary for society to run smoothly. And the macro scale issue that she said in a micro scale way is that society has undesirable jobs that must be done in order for society to run smoothly. There are a lot of undesirable jobs. Those are the jobs that you're in college right now to not have to do forever. Like right now, rolling eyes and sighing. Exactly, right? I mean, say amen. That's why we're here. So there are a ton of undesirable jobs. Y'all know the ones I'm talking about. Do you clean hotel rooms? Do you clean out the grease trap at Kroger, in the deli? Do you, what are those kinds of things that are undesirable that you're going to do right now because you're a college student, or people impoverished, like you said, are on a micro scale, people who are impoverished are motivated to take work that nobody else wants to do for a long time because it's better than nothing. And on a macro scale, do we have some jobs that are necessary for society to run smoothly, to be recognizable society like you and I recognize? And if people were not impoverished on a macro scale, if poverty did not exist, would those jobs necessarily be filled? Then our society would not be the same society that it was the decade before or whatever. That is absolutely one of the macro scale things. Poverty, in general, macro scale, ensures that all the necessary work in society gets done. Another thing is, let me ask you, anybody else have an idea before I give you another thing? Before I give it to you? Here's my question. Do you think poverty creates jobs? I see the shaking your head. How? How do you think poverty might? Like, what jobs am I talking about? Social service jobs. Social service jobs do not put the person who's working into poverty. They are working class, middle class jobs that will enable you to make a reasonable living and at least partially support a family, but they are created solely because other people exist in poverty. Somebody has to run the housing voucher program, and somebody has to run Medicaid, and somebody has to run Our Kids First, and there are people who do all those governmental jobs, but think about the charitable organizations that are attached to private companies or churches or something. There's a whole lot of jobs that are created because poverty exists. The people in poverty don't take those jobs. People in middle class or people in working class take those jobs and have a reasonable income because poverty exists. It's part of the machine. So even from a functionalist point of view, even if you think of something, just one second, even if you think of something that doesn't sound nice, like from a micro scale it doesn't sound nice, you got to zoom out. Macro level is much harder to think about, honestly, than micro level. And even when you pinpointed a macro level example, because you hit the nail on the head, to articulate macro level stuff, to say it, is hard because we've never done it before, and so we're going to even use micro level examples to, even when we hit the nail on the head with a macro level example. Yes, ma'am?
I was going to say, when you have poverty, you have crime. When you have crime, you have prison. And
There's another what? Yep. So is crime something that on a micro scale, if you're a victim, is it nice?
No.
No. But on a macro scale, is it good?
It is, because you can work 8 hours a day and only get paid 30 cents or something like that. Like you work.
Oh, the prisoner themselves? Oh, well, yeah, but everybody who runs the jails, too, like has, state benefits and all, there are some jobs that are low paying in the prisons and some jobs that are high paying. There's court systems, there's social workers to help the children of the people who are incarcerated. There's all kinds of jobs that are connected with crime, as an example. Yeah, crime exists on the macro scale. So again, it's part of the machine. It's part of the machine. Y'all with me? What do you got? Just drawing some sociology pictures? Good. Just make sure you're sticking with us, okay? All right. So are we good with functionalism? Question, or the introduction to functionalism? I mean, I don't expect y'all to go out and write a 17-page thesis on it. No. We're not going to do that. No. But you're good? Do you want to ask any questions? Okay. So let's do the two other perspectives. So when you are using your sociological imagination and identifying macro scale things that affect micro scale experiences, when you're using your sociological imagination, you can interpret those macro scale things in the way a functionalist interprets society. That's one of the valid ways that sociologists interpret social information, social data. The second, very common second way that sociologists interpret data, so the second perspective, is something we call conflict theory. Conflict theory. Is this going? I guess that's going. I'm about to
Did it
die.
work on you yesterday?
Yes, it did.
Working last
Yes, it did. You have no bruises.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so conflict theory. Conflict theory came from a social scientist named Karl Marx. Have you heard of him? Yes. You'll hear about him. That's social scientist, right? Social scientist Karl Marx. You'll hear about Karl Marx in philosophy class, in economics class, in psychology class, now sociology class, history. You'll hear about him all the time. Okay. So he did not come up with something called conflict theory, which is our second perspective. You should be taking notes under the sociological perspectives heading right now. This is our second of our sociological perspectives. So this is a way of interpreting social information. He did not come up with social conflict theory, but his ideas were used later by other people to develop the idea of macro scale society being structured in a way according to what he said, according to his ideas. So let me tell you what those are. So, social conflict theory is another macro level theory. So we can use micro level examples to, try and understand the macro level theory, but we have to be careful and make sure we zoom out enough to look at society as a whole, or huge groups of people, groupings of people across a population. Okay? So it is a macro level theory that looks at social structure as being designed full of inequalities. So the design of our social structure is full of inequality. Design of our social structure is full of inequality. I wish this would charge up. It's gonna die. I'm gonna have to do another video for the online folks, but that's okay. Okay, so so we're still talking about a macro level term, social structure. So when we used the car metaphor a minute ago with all the parts connected in a predictable way, a conflict theorist would agree with a functionalist about that society has different parts, society is a system like the human body is a system, and all these things connect together. But a conflict theorist has a very major difference over functionalism. They say that those parts are hooked together in the social system, and they promote inequality. They promote inequality. There is a term in your textbook, the reading assignment in your textbook, which is like page 1 through 9, and then we skip to 14 through 31 in chapter 1. That's where we are at the moment. There is something called a category of people. This is a large grouping across a population that have similar characteristics in common. Similar characteristics in common. category of people. And I didn't give you this vocabulary word until now, a category. But we kind of have been talking about this some already because, if we talked about females with children who are 25 to 35 years old, that's a category of people. I listed the characteristics they have in common. They're female, they have kids, they're 25 to 35 years old. Or baby boomers, there's a category of people. They have age in common, they have interests in common, they have life history in common. So from the macro scale, we often talk about categories of people and the way social structure affects the different categories of people in different ways. A conflict theorist talks about categories of people and how inequality is at the core of the differences between them. So the categories of people we talk about in conflict theory are called, in general, we call these two categories of people the haves, and we usually put a versus in there. What? The have-nots. No apostrophe, but with haves and have-nots. They're just plain old plural. Haves versus the have-nots. This is a category of people that has power, that has influence, that has money, that has gender preference, that has et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of ways that the power can play out. Political voice. That's the haves, and the have-nots are the powerless, or the voiceless people in society. Demographics and categories are very similar. This is a more general term. Yes, demographics are you're going to use a lot when you're studying things like population trends, things called like push and pull mechanisms and migration patterns. You're going to look at really technical aspects of these characteristics they have in common. And when you get right down into the really technical and quantitative data, like you want to know percentages and all these kinds of things, you would transition to use the word demographics. Very similar, good connection to make, because it's a very similar concept. Okay. I'm sorry, let me see if I can get this to charge one more time. No! No, I'm not. Okay, well, we'll just have to see how long it lasts. Okay, so let me stop here and let me get some more questions. Anybody else have some more questions? My coffee was very effective this morning, I feel like. Are we good? Is it getting hot or?
It's getting very hot.
It's getting very hot. Well, y'all don't sit there and boil. Let's see if this helps. Yeah, you need to have it outside. I don't scream too much. I won't bother everybody else. Okay. So, no questions? When I say category of people, look, I've used this word population here. So we're talking about macro level stuff. We're not talking about the you and me. There are plenty of you and me's in any category of people, but when you collect all those together and they have similar life experiences, similar social characteristics, the structure of society affects them differently. They have different outlooks. Okay? A conflict theorist says that inequality is really what glues society together. They don't like inequality. They want to get rid of it. So, for instance, there is a social fact that we have talked about already in class. This is just day 3, but we've talked about gender roles and how on a macro scale, society kind of writes what the definition of gender roles are, right? We inherit it when we're born. Okay, so some of the gender roles were that men go into the workforce, men go into politics, men make those decisions. It's not one man's fault. It's the social structure that we inherited. Women stay at home, women don't work, women don't have a political voice. That was the old way of doing things. But what happened 100 years ago as far as women's role in politics? Anybody know? This is too... The what? The women have the right to vote. So was that an easy thing? What happened? Anybody know that part of our history? What had to happen in order for women to get the right to vote? Sir? I like that. Yes, to make it concise, we had to throw a fit. We had to collectively get together as a category of people, women, and throw a fit. I like it, right? You see where this word conflict comes from? Fit throwing.
You gotta start a conflict.
Well, a functionalist said you don't have to. Well, you might not be a functionalist then. Because a functionalist would say, okay, there's lots of different roles that have to be filled in society, and the structure of our society just is that men do this and women do that, and that's just the structure of our society.
Like functionalists on
Oh.
You gotta fight for what you.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's,
So you think functionalist like, well, a functionalist likes the fight because society has to change over time, right? Society has to change over time, so there's going to be struggles as part of the social structure, and that's just how it is, and it's supposed to be that way. And you also make money off that because you print political posters and people go to work for campaigns and stuff like that. So a functionalist has a different, can look at the same exact thing and say, okay, that struggle is part of the social structure, and it's beneficial to the economy, and it's beneficial to the American family, and it's beneficial to the education system because we're sitting here talking about it, and everything else. Right? Yes, sir.
So if drastic change, they believe in drastic change since they believe in throwing a fit. Is that how they?
Oh, yes. They want change like right now. Like, let's not, social justice is right here. Like, we need to get rid of this stuff. This is not fair. We need to get rid of it. So wherever we can identify it, in the example I gave, men versus women. Right to vote, no right to vote, on a macro scale. Now, the social fact that affected why women did not have the right to vote was just gender roles in general, right? Long time gender roles, years and years, hundreds of years, inherited from other countries whose immigrants came here and set up life as we know it today. So the gender roles are the macro scale issue that made men be the haves and women be the have-nots in that particular example. Okay? Wealth versus poverty could be an example. Politicians versus, impoverished people who don't have a voice or representation. There's lots of ways you can be haves versus have-nots. Race, absolutely. Yes. Caucasian, non-Caucasian. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we can plug anybody into the haves versus the have-nots. You have to zoom out from a situation far enough to know what is the macro scale issue that's causing the inequality. So when we talk about women's right to vote, it's really not one logical step to say, oh, poverty is a macro scale thing that affects women's right to vote. Well, you can maybe make your argument, but you've missed me on several steps there. But if you say women's right to vote, okay, we had to fight for it. We had to throw a fit for it. So let's zoom out. What is the macro scale part of our social structure? Gender roles is most directly related there. And gender roles, traditional gender roles that we inherited from centuries and centuries say this is true about men, this is true about women. That translated into the micro-scale life experience of women couldn't vote or own their own property. As a category of people, women were the have-nots and men were the haves. Men had the political voice, women were voiceless. Make sense? So any issue in society from the macro scale, a conflict theorist looks at where there's inequality at the core. Where is that inequality and what can we do to fix it?
So,
Mm-hmm.
so when I was reading about Harriet Martineau.
Yes.
Okay, So what would she be considered? I know she's a,
You tell me.
I think she would be a conflict theorist.
Why do you think Harriet Martineau would be a conflict theorist?
Because she felt that everybody is created equally, and then when she did her study, she said that race, the sufferers. That's what she said.
The sufferers.
The people that suffered, the have-nots, should have the same, privileges and everything as the have.
Y'all hear what Mallory's doing here? This is the kind of question that you need to ask yourself while you're reviewing this information and when you're doing that activity that's on, I almost said PowerPoint. It's not on PowerPoint. What? Blackboard. Ugh. When you go to Blackboard and you see the first activity that you're going to work on part of the way at home and part of the way here, those questions that Mallory's asking herself, I was reading about this chick, what was her game? Which one of these would she be? Let me read what she did. It sounds to me like what she did was have a whole lot of interest in this stuff. Sounds to me like saying that there are groups of sufferers in society. That sounds a heck of a lot like the more general word have-nots. And the people who cause the suffering sounds a whole lot like a more general word haves. So you know what? It might not say it exactly word for word in the textbook, but it would be a true statement. She could argue very successfully that it's a true statement that Harriet Martineau is a conflict theorist in general. She uses conflict theory by default to interpret the information she scientifically gathers, to examine society.
I also read they didn't pay attention to her.
No, gee, was there a social fact that maybe caused society not to pay attention to Harriet Martineau when she was alive? Oh, was it biases coming out of gender roles? See there? Sociological imagination at work, y'all. That's how we do it. We don't just throw individual fits, right? We know that we can band together, and that's what a conflict theorist how a conflict theorist looks at society. You got it?
So those are like the strikers, the rioters.
Oh, good. Yeah, why would you strike? What is a strike, by the way?
When you're protesting against something that isn't
A protest against like employers and stuff? Yeah, so you want better benefits, you want better time, you want shorter hours, you want better pay, you want, respect or whatever it is. So yeah, a strike is exactly that. Workers, category of people, workers mobilizing, throwing fits in an organized way to communicate, hey, we are and you people better listen. We control whether you're making your profits. Don't believe us? Let's go on strike.
Yeah.
Let's use our power that we didn't really know we had to force you to listen. If you have a sociological imagination, if you know how to think critically, you can use your social condition with everybody else who has that social condition as a tool. That's what theorists who use this promote, what Harriet Martineau promoted. And that's not popular. These folks don't like that.
Because can't they also throw a figure in the
Amen, they can.
They can.
So then what do you, so then also this reminds me, somebody asked me, I think it was this class, somebody was like, well, how do we change social facts? Was that this class? Like, how do we make some changes? So, okay, so maybe it's not enough. Maybe what you're saying, oh, well, can't they just fire us and hire other people? Well, if you don't have any protections, so then that would be a very educational experience. It stinks to be you right in that moment, but that's a very educational experience that the rest of the category of people can learn from. Did they try to fight the correct battle? Or does the battle need to be bigger on the macro scale and we go to government and legislation to make sure that employers cannot? You have a workplace protection acts, for instance. ACTS acts, like in government. Yes? I'm going to stop this because it's about to die anyway. So bye, online students. I will tell you about symbolic interactionism later. Bye.